To the extent that we live our lives in a manner that is consistent with the truth in our heart, we thrive.
Welcome to the Meyer Clinics podcast, and you just heard a quote from one of your hosts, Dr. Lisa Day. Join our licensed clinical professionals from various backgrounds as they discuss fascinating mental health topics with a wide range of guests. Meyer Clinics is a Christian counseling organization with multiple clinics nationwide dedicated to treating the whole person, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Welcome to our listening family. We thank you for joining us. Hi, everyone. Kristen Walker here. We are doing another show with Dr. Lisa Day. We're doing this one as a follow-up to the show that we did about ADHD in women, and we had such a great response to that show. I'm a woman. I have this diagnosis. Dr. Paul Meyer is the one who helped me figure that out on my show, and it's changed my life knowing about this diagnosis. And there's a lot of questions out there from all of you. So Lisa, thank you so much for coming on again. I have so much fun on these with you, and for, being so thoughtful with your answers to these questions that came in.
Oh, you betcha. I'm glad to be back. There's so much to learn, so much to grow.
Yeah, exactly. Believe me, listeners, this will not be the last show that we do on this either.
And in talk, ADHD in women, we were talking in the previous show of the incident of how highly it's undiagnosed.
Yes.
It goes, it flies under the radar, and so many diagnoses or misdiagnoses occur. So it's fun to elaborate further on how we can have the right diagnosis, the right treatment, and look at the effectiveness and the different kinds of treatment. So I'm excited to do this.
And I think too, honestly, for me and listeners, please honor this in yourself if this resonates with you. I definitely went through a grieving period for myself when I found this out, and then I see how my life is. It makes me a little teary-eyed. I see how my life is now that I'm, being medicated properly for this, which I'm not ashamed of in any way, because I'm now realizing, my goodness, if I had been diagnosed with this in my teens, in my 20s, even in my 30s, what a different life I would have had. And so there was some grieving for me around, that's
how much has been
bad.
lost.
Yeah.
I see that both with new diagnoses with adult women with ADHD, just the regrets of what should I have done? Could I have been a Harvard graduate or what have you?
Yeah.
But another area that I see, Kristen, which is becoming more and more popular and has really been a misdiagnosis, is the amount of folks who have spent, a good part of their life struggling with alcohol, drugs, compulsive overeating. Thinking that they're just slovenly, and their parents or family thinking that they're, just a complete mess because they can't keep their life together. They can't pay their bills. They can't get through school. They can't keep a job. They're abusing alcohol. They're addicted to drugs.
Binge eating.
Yes. And then, I have a 27-year-old who I work with who, long history of substance abuse, ended up with heroin use, and great difficulty getting through school, was able to get through college, came and met with me. And we looked at, I said, did you ever consider that there might be an underlying diagnosis behind this, these years of substance abuse and years of eating disorders? And really, once getting on the medication and being able to, for that, all that chatter in the mind, and being able to quiet her mind through medication rather than through substance abuse, huge regrets. And, she said, Lisa, why did it take to be 27 years old before I found this? I thought that I'm a complete loser. I thought that I'm an alcoholic, a drug addict. I can't get through school. My family thinks I'm a mess. And now I have freedom.
You look at other people, like I have done this. And there are other reasons why I did this too, but some of it was I have looked at other people and what they've been able to achieve in their lives and been like, well, I guess I was just born like sort of a loser, that I just can't do those things. And then really, I mean, I'm not nice to myself, and I'm working on that enough as it is. I didn't need to add, that on top of it, but I did. I would be around other people that had things that I don't have, and I wasn't jealous or envious of them. It was more, what is wrong? I guess I'm just somebody that isn't a high achiever, or just was born without the ability to do stuff until the right diagnosis came along.
Well, and it's sad to me, and it really does require some grieving, but the number of times when I've had people sit in my office and we'll walk through, just really, I'll pull out the DSM-5 and we'll just walk through the diagnostic criteria. And then I'll walk through with them some of the symptoms. We'll go through the inattentive form of ADHD, and we'll talk about making careless mistakes, difficulty paying attention or listening, low self-esteem, difficulty with directions, simple things such as paying a speeding ticket,
Right.
avoid mundane, because it becomes overwhelming and then it just blasts them. So whether it's the inattentive type or it's hyperactive, I'll say hyperactive is you can't sit still, you're constantly interrupting people, you're restless, chattering mind, chattering thought, can't stop the chatter, super energy, talks incessantly. When I sit with people and I say, a couple more, I can't even count how many times I've had a young woman in my office, or even an older woman in my office, and this is a response, some form of this. They look at me, sober, in my eyes, with tears in theirs, and they said, I'm not a bad person. I have mental illness. And never for once did they think that this assortment of symptoms would fall under the category of mental illness. The shame that they take with,
Yes.
I'm just defective, I'm bad, I'm no good, I don't measure up. And so it's so freeing, to be able to put a label to it, and then, to embark upon a treatment protocol that really can provide significant changes in life and set you up for productivity, increase self-esteem. So getting the diagnosis and getting the proper treatment is life-changing, just life-changing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to get to the whole age thing on that too. But what I did is we got hundreds of emails. Okay. So, and I never, I take all of your emails, listeners. I don't want you to feel like, we aren't answering your specific email. I take so many of them are the same. They're just worded in the way that you write them. So I take them and I compile them into, ones that are exactly what you've asked, but the same question by many people. And we came back with 5 out of the hundreds. That's how common, okay, I want you to understand, listeners, that's how common this is, because y'all sent in hundreds of emails, and I was able to siphon those down into 5 of the same questions that came from each of your emails. So the first one was, why do you think this was not a common diagnosis for women? Do you think people just assumed we are scatterbrained?
Interesting. And statistics show us that ADHD is diagnosed in adults 13% in men versus 5% in women. And yet we know that the disorder is about equal as far as a neurochemical disorder, but the distinct difference in how often it is diagnosed is puzzling. And, so to address that question, right off the bat, the differential, there's 2 main reasons, but the first one is that often these symptoms, the careless mistakes, difficulty with organization or concentrating, or, being impulsive or interruptive or talking someone's brain off, they're attributed to character disorders. So with women, when people see these symptoms in women, or even when women see these symptoms in themselves, they think it's a character defect, a character flaw. It's just something,
Yes.
who they are. And so they think they're drama queens, they're lazy or disorganized, spacey chatterboxes. They don't think
Too emotional, which we get enough of that as women anyway.
too emotional. Yeah. And so it comes down to a character defect, if you will, versus a mental illness. So that's one of the main reasons that I see. But the other thing that we see is that clinically, at least from a clinician's point of view, women, we know, present for therapy, far more than men. But typically what women with ADHD are presenting to therapy, the most common is going to be depression, followed by anxiety, followed by eating issues, either compulsive overeating or assortment of eating disorders, or substance abuse.
Mm-hmm.
So we're seeing a misdiagnosis. So it's rather than being diagnosed with the underlying issue, which is the ADHD, they're being diagnosed with a generalized anxiety disorder, a major depressive disorder, a substance abuse or dependence disorder. And so it's missed. We don't find it. But when, and so scattered brain, overeating, disorganized woman versus, whoa, let's take a look at what's really causing this. And, with regard to the anxiety and depression, it's kind of, what comes first, the chicken or the egg. So we know that women with ADHD often can have comorbid or coexisting disorders. So you can have ADHD and generalized anxiety disorder, or you can have ADHD and depressive disorder. But oftentimes the depression and anxiety is a direct result of the untreated ADHD. And so
absolutely,
we'll talk a little bit about this later, but it really becomes a bit of a dissecting game with regard to medication. How can we best meet and best address the neurochemical component of this disorder?
Yeah, listen, let me tell you, the thing that quieted my mind for years in my 30s was alcohol.
The only thing that stops you, probably. Or stops the brain.
Yeah, I didn't crave alcohol. Like I have friends that are alcoholics, hardcore alcoholics. They cannot have a thimble of alcohol without it turning into 3 days, 5 days later, they're homeless. No one can find them. They're in a hotel. They've lost their job. And that's how alcoholism affects them. For me, that was not, there's no shame in that. It is a disease. For me, it was literally the only time that I could have at least 3 hours of peace in my head.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea. I don't have a history of alcoholism in my family. I went through all the you're horrible, you're this, you're that, all those things that we all do. And it's been such a blessing to realize that's what that's about. So I don't have to be ashamed. I shouldn't have been anyway, but I don't have to shame myself that I have this whatever with alcohol. I did it because I was trying to do for something I had that I didn't know that I had. So anyway, let's move to the...
No, that's actually very important to look at, because not only do you then, an undiagnosed ADHD woman, not only does one then carry the shame of either the hyperactive or the inattentive, so all of the symptoms that come with the failure to produce or show up or what have you, then when alcohol is on board, then there's the secondary shame of the numbing and distracting, the criticism from family and friends. But what's important, this is where Nurse Lisa is going to step up again, is that we have to remember, and I get so excited when I talk about neurochemistry, but with ADHD, we have dopamine deficits in our prefrontal cortex. And so it's not only that the alcohol absolutely is quieting or comforting or soothing when you are experiencing untreated ADHD, but with low levels of dopamine, you crave alcohol. Neurochemically, you're going to crave that alcohol. And then when you drink the alcohol, you're left with an even greater deficit in dopamine. So your ADHD symptoms are going to be worse after drinking alcohol, your neurochemical is going to be more deprived after alcohol, thus reinforcing the cycle of increased ADHD symptoms with an increased drive to numb and distract with alcohol. And it's beyond choice. It's neurochemically. Yeah, no, so it's so important.
Wow.
Yeah.
Please hear that again. Rewind this. Write it down. You crave it because that's your body chemistry. You crave it, and then you do it, and it makes it worse. Oh my gosh, that is such a...
Whereas when we get the proper medication, and I know we'll talk a little bit about this more in the show, but when we get the proper medication of Adderall or Vyvanse, while alcohol numbs and distracts or quiets the mind and we crave it because of the dopamine deficiency, as I mentioned, after the fact, alcohol causes a greater drop in the dopamine. Whereas with the proper medication for ADHD, it increases the availability in your prefrontal cortex of dopamine. So that's where the therapeutic at a neurochemical level shows up. So it's a huge part in the treatment of freedom. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about, we had someone write in, or a lot of people write in about, how has the diagnosis that you've seen change people's lives, women's lives, especially because this focuses on women. Trust me, men have this too, but this particular focuses on women. How have you seen lives changed for the better?
Oh, it's all over the place. I'll just think, I had a client I worked with last spring, and she's about 50 years old, and she presented, typically with anxiety, depression. It just really, her get up and go, got up and went. She didn't have direction, felt scattered, super bright woman, did excellent in high school. She just sailed through high school. But when she got to college, the balance between her academics and maintaining, taking care of herself was overwhelming. Either her academics were succeeding and her personal care was failing, or vice versa. And she eventually dropped out. She, a super bright woman, never kept a job probably more than 6 months. Either she would lose it because of not being able to follow through on projects, or disorganization, or difficulties working with other team members. And so she would go from job to job, which, over the period of her life, disappointed her partner, disappointed her family, created a tremendous level of low self-esteem for her. And when I came to know her, she had taken a job at a computer company, I think in administrative position there, and had met a coworker who she really clicked with. Their personalities were, in sync. They had a great sense of humor, and they got to know each other. And anyway, long story short, her friend was talking about where she'd been and that she'd been diagnosed with ADHD, and it changed her life. So my client went home and she Googled it up, and she thought, oh my goodness, there I am.
This is me.
This is me. Holy moly. I'm not a freak of nature. There are other people.
Not just a loser failure.
Well, she'd come to the place that non-performance was a theme. And it was really inconsistent with who she saw herself as, because super bright, tons of ideas. But then once she'd get them going, she would lose focus. And she thought that losing focus was normal. She felt inferior to those who are highly motivated, but she thought it was normal for her. She never, and this is what she said, Lisa, I never thought that this would be a medical disorder or a mental health issue disorder. And so with this woman, it was so much fun. We referred her out, and she was prescribed Adderall. And this is a woman who had never consumed alcohol, never, partook in recreational drugs, and she was scared to death. She said, I don't want to do it, Lisa. They're stimulants. They're controlled. They're get a felony if you're caught with them without a prescription. And so we started her on a super, super, super low dose. And she didn't notice anything. She said, okay, I'm taking these and I don't notice anything. But, we're going to start working with a prescribing psychiatrist. You're going to start low and see where it goes. And on the initial very low doses, when her family member, her husband, would come in, he said, night and day. She's approachable. She doesn't bite. She no longer bites, he said. I said, lovely. But she no longer bites. She would get overwhelmed and just snap. And, so with her, we titrated it up to a dose that, was working for her. But she found a job that she loved. She went, got involved in social groups, whereas before she was isolating. She felt more calm, more focused, more pleasant. She started saying that she felt like a normal person. She didn't know what a normal person felt like before. And like you were saying earlier, Kristen, she said, Lisa, I'm 50 years old. And I've been struggling with this my entire life, and I feel plagued, and in that situation, we really have to, referring to other podcasts that we've done, we have to grieve the undiagnosed portion of our life so that, and forgive ourselves and forgive the system, if you will, that it wasn't diagnosed, so that we can focus our energy into all of not only the medication treatment, but many of the therapeutic tasks that we can do in the treatment of ADHD and moving forward. But absolutely changed her life. Absolutely changed her life.
I will tell you this for me, like listeners, I'm not saying this to brag in any way, shape, or form. I'm literally using this as an example. And there was a lot of trauma. I mean, horrific trauma in my childhood. So that contributed to a lot of things for me too. But I couldn't complete schoolwork. I could not focus. I always wanted to sleep. And again, a lot of that was trauma, but it also was this. And I was forced to take an IQ test to get into Mensa, okay, which I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but it's it's this world known high IQ society. Okay. And you have to be, your IQ has to be 130 or higher to be able to be in it. So you're considered in the top 2% in terms of your IQ. That doesn't make you a better person. Believe me, there's plenty of people with a really high IQ, and they're not very nice people at all.
It can be a tormented soul type thing.
Exactly. But I was forced to take this test because even my teachers were like, this is a bright, young woman. Like, we need to somehow show her how bright she is, because then maybe she'll see. So I, with flying colors, made it right into Mensa, and it did nothing for me to know that. Nothing, because the diagnosis for what was going on and why I couldn't complete tasks, why I fell asleep all the time, why I did certain things was not there. So even the, oh, look, you're in the top 2%, I was like, so it ain't doing anything for me.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, yeah, because all the other symptoms are paralyzing. They disable us.
Yes, paralyzing. Thank you.
And what I observe, with young women who are still in high school is that, though they're super bright, and generally speaking, this, Kristen, firsthand experience is that we do see exceptional intellect that comes with ADHD. They just, it comes with the territory. It's very common to be incredibly bright, which makes it even more frustrating, in my opinion, when you're not able to perform. Because
Yes.
you've got it there in the brain, but you're not able to execute it. You're not able to follow through.
Yes.
Executive functioning oftentimes gets, very much interrupted. And so, we talk about neurotypical, and certainly ADHD is not neurotypical. And so the traditional learning environments are not designed for someone who's not neurotypical. And so you've got someone with ADHD hyperactive having to sit in a chair for 50 minutes at a time for 6
Forget it.
in a row,
Not going to happen. Thank you.
I know that the only way I made it through school is I constantly designed houses. I would design houses while encoding what was being lectured. Follow me. If I wasn't designing a house, I've designed, probably 6 million houses. But all during high school, that's the only thing that got me through. I had to be designing these houses, per scale, while listening. And then while listening, I could encode it. I have a photographic memory, but never realizing that the reason I had to design houses in order to stay in class was to keep me from, throwing an eraser at the teacher or something. It was cruel. I mean, it was cruel. And so neurotypically, we don't, if we have ADHD, we don't fit into the typical education system.
No.
And so it's really difficult.
This is why Montessori school was great for me, and public school was a horror show, because Montessori school is not, you are active. I was helping kids younger than me. It was amazing. My ability to, my English grammar and writing and all that, those scores were off the chain. And when I was in 7th grade, because I was in Montessori school, which is very, I'm not saying every Montessori school is great, but it was a different kind of learning. Whereas, you put me in public school and it was like, boop.
Yeah, overwhelming, because it's for the neurotypical.
Hi, this is Dr. Paul Meyer, founder of the national chain of Meyer Clinics. I've often told you about how people just like you are getting the healing that they need from emotional issues like depression, anxiety, anger problems, and relational problems. We wanted to share with you Mickey's experience at our day program and how it has affected his life.
The Meyer Clinics has been a real blessing to me. Dr. Meyer told me that people get well here, and my life has been completely changed. I have been symptom-free for 3 years, and I'd recommend it to anybody that really wants to overcome an emotional problem of any kind.
Mickey's story is like so many others that we receive. It's an encouragement to us, and we hope it will also be an encouragement to you to call us to get the emotional help that you've needed. Please call toll-free 888-7-CLINIC to be connected to the Meyer Clinic program nearest you. That's 1-888-7-CLINIC, or go to MeyerClinics.com. That's www.meierclinics.com.
Yeah, for the neurotypical. And one of the things that is frustrating or concerning to me as a clinician is that, while we have so many clinicians out there, in my experience, there are very few clinicians that are experienced with treating adult ADHD.
Yes.
And there's even fewer that are familiar with the unique issues faced by women with ADHD. Women are responsible for the home, and they have trouble. Women who I work with, the thought of meal planning for a week and going to the grocery store and doing those two things, it's overwhelming. They don't do it. They don't cook. Laundry will be stuck in the washing machine for 4 to 5 days. Yes. Yeah. And so it's there, we have ADHD in men and we have ADHD in women, but because of the multitasking that's required with remembering your kid's dental appointment, or that there's an appointment at school, or you've got a play date, or you've got to organize a brownies meeting or a Girl Scout meeting, it's overwhelming. And so untreated, really, you can't function, and so when we look at ADHD and we look for a clinician who to work with ADHD, it's multimodal, and so when you look at once diagnosed, has it changed my life? Unfortunately, too many people seek treatment by clinicians who are not experts in ADHD,
Right.
and they apply the typical or the standard therapeutic approaches, which will help with anxiety, they'll help with depression. But with ADHD, we need to look at things such as self-esteem, interpersonal issues, family issues, daily health habits, organizing. And then there's another whole set, which unless, again, a clinician is educated in this area, which we call, this is a mouthful, but we call it neurocognitive psychotherapeutic strategies. Try to say that 3 times. But really, it's cognitive rehabilitation. I mean, where we work with women on remembering, with reasoning, with understanding. We work on problem solving, evaluating, learning how to use judgment. When the dopamine deficits in the prefrontal cortex occur, we don't use judgment, we don't evaluate. And so learning these compensatory strategies gives people the skill, to structure their environment so that they're successful. And so how does it affect their life? It's just, it's night and day. It's night and day. And the other thing, when you're talking about a skilled clinician and, once diagnosed and treatment, so we're gonna have the cognitive behavioral or the psychotherapeutic component, we have the medication component. And one of the things that differs between men and women is that with women, they're, as we mentioned earlier, they're more likely to have these coexisting or comorbid diagnoses, such as anxiety or depression. But another factor that, if not considered by an expert, are the hormonal fluctuations. So, through a woman's lifetime, so we have puberty, we have perimenopause, we have menopause, we have just the menstrual cycle. And what research has shown us, which is just fascinating, is that as estrogen levels drop, throughout your cycle, ADHD symptoms increase. Wow. And so it further complicates, the medication game of, do we go Adderall, do we go Ritalin, do we go Vyvanse, and sometimes hormone replacement. So, those are all factors we want to think about, in the treatment, but also are going to influence, the significant difference that we see on the other side once you are diagnosed and once you do find treatment.
Okay, that's fantastic. So this is a question that I wondered about too, and we had a lot of them about this. So several of our listeners wrote in and said something to akin to, sometimes I don't take my Vyvanse or Adderall or Ritalin on the weekends, or I run out and forget to refill the prescription. I start feeling extra sluggish and worn out. I was wondering if that's probably how I always felt, but it seems more extreme now that I know what life is like on the medication.
That's a fantastic question. And oftentimes people will even report to me that when they're not on the medication, that the symptoms are worse. And so they're wondering if they're getting a paradoxical effect, meaning by taking the medication, are my symptoms getting worse? That's
yes.
Yeah.
That was asked a lot too. And I just sort of munched it into this question.
Yeah. And I don't think so. And in my 25 years as a licensed clinical psychologist and psychiatric nurse, what I observe is that there is such a difference when we have our neurochemical balance, if you will, through the medication, or we have more dopamine effective, that we're able to function at such high levels that when you are off, it blows you away that you were that disabled. Follow me? It's, how did I make it this far? I mean, how did I get my driver's license, right? How did I not wreck 10 cars? How did I manage a bank account? And so when you do take the medication, you're on fire, you're super focused, your sense of well-being is increased, your ability to be methodical and calculated, all of those things help increase your self-esteem. So what I observe sometimes, because we do recommend, most psychiatrists are going to recommend, at least with adults, to take a break. And we can talk about that as we move on. But when one is off it, they do feel disabled. They feel flatlined. So what we try to do therapeutically is to, that's why it's important not only to take medication, but to implement these therapeutic strategies of organization, of increasing structure, of remembering skills, and structuring our life so that we have a medication component, but then we also have, it's like a cookbook recipe. It's not that simple, of course, but we say, okay, are these 7 things in check? Am I utilizing these skills while either I've run out of medication or if I'm taking a medication break? But I don't think that in my opinion, I don't think that the symptoms get worse because of taking medication. I think that we become acutely aware of how disabled we were
before.
Yeah.
Okay. It's funny. I will say this will make listeners laugh. Those of you that know Dr. Paul Meyer, I was telling him, that I had got my prescription for Vyvanse and I'm starting, low at 30 milligrams. And Paul goes, "What? That's a child's dosage."
Well, it's difficult to determine, right? But people are terrified. They think stimulant and they think they're going to be the ever ready bunny. And that's not what happens. What happens is it actually calms our mind and we're more calculated. Yeah.
Yes. And I know now after taking it for a month, I definitely need to take more of it because that is a really low dose, but it was good to start with a low dose because if I had started on a higher one, I may have been like, what is going on? So, and I did have a period in the beginning where, it's not like I haven't been this way off of medication. It's just that I would have periods of being this way, but they were brought on by extremely stressful events going on in my life, which because of my childhood, I became the world's greatest chaos manager. And so my body got used to the adrenaline hit of managing chaos. And so it makes perfect sense that during those times, I was getting pumped filled with so much adrenaline from the stress that boy, did I get a lot of stuff done. But with therapy, my life is very calm and peaceful and happy and all those things that it should be. I don't want some big crisis to come in to get me to that place. And hence, thank goodness for medication.
Well, and too, in our previous show, we talked about that research is showing us that folks untreated ADHD are more likely to seek conflict, just like we're talking about conflict and chaos, because when that prefrontal lobe can focus, it's actually soothing, much in the way that alcohol is. It's soothing and it's focused. Now, when that focus is on chaos and drama, judgment and criticism, power and control, the fallout from that makes the rest of our life a
horrible
circus. But it feels good in the mind. Yeah, so it's a crazy thing. But it's interesting when you speak of that, and back in the day, literature wasn't as up to speed as it is today. And I used to work a great deal with compulsive overeating, and I stumbled upon this, probably 5 years into my career, so about 20 years ago. And it was a common theme, and women would come in and they would be overweight, and their number one complaint was compulsive overeating, which is usually related to anxiety. You're going to compulsively overeat, secondary to maybe a depressive episode. And so I found, and one of my favorite starts with medication, if we can, because of the low side effects, is Wellbutrin. And so I would say, let's try this Wellbutrin for your depression because it has the fewest side effects. And let's see if we can, begin to bring down the disabling symptoms of anxiety and depression. But then we noticed this strange thing. And my clients would come in and they say, "Lisa, I'm going to the refrigerator, I'm opening the door and I'm looking at it. And I'm just looking at it."
Been there.
Yes. And they're like, the Wellbutrin, I'm feeling better, but all of a sudden my need to put, and if you think of a cigarette smoker, back and forth, Wellbutrin used to be used a great deal with cigarette smoking cessation. But here I am with these compulsive women who are struggling with compulsive overeating. Their depression is going down, but then they're finding themselves overeating less. And so, I thought at that time, oh, okay, they're less anxious and they're less depressed. Then my little noodle went bing bong. Maybe this Wellbutrin, because its effect on dopamine, is addressing ADHD. And so Wellbutrin we'll see often as the medication, a non-stimulant medication used for the treatment of ADHD, but again, life-changing. No
Yes.
compulsive overeating, your body weight goes down, your self-esteem goes up, your depression goes down.
That's one I use. I love it.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's just fantastic. But for years, why can't I not eat, Lisa? So why do I incessantly go to the refrigerator and eat, or eat cookie after cookie after cookie, even though I know I don't want to? And again, it's like that alcohol, the drive force just bombards through the reason.
Oh yeah.
So when we're diagnosed, we have the ability to intervene that, which is again very freeing.
Okay, fantastic. So, okay, another question is, when I take my medication, I get so much done. It doesn't feel like my brain is this complicated, heavy mess preventing me from focusing. Am I, however, in danger of burning out if I keep taking medication?
I'm not laughing at the question. I'm laughing at the example that comes to my mind. Okay, so we'll take a little tangent here. So I had this client, and this was not a female. This was a male with adult ADHD, completely scattered all over the board. Again, the typical numbing and distracting with alcohol, job after job after job, super goober bright, very, very fascinating man to talk to. But when you talk about, am I in danger of burning out? I'll never forget the example. His family, his wife came in with him, and, we're going to do a check of how this is going. And she said, oh my goodness, 99% fantastic, super focused, super pleasant, no more rage, no more impulsive outbursts. She said, but then there is the computer. And I said, what are you talking about? She goes, my son was having a glitch in his computer and the hard drive seemed to be sticking. And so my husband sat down to take a look at it. 4 hours later, after he completely disassembled the entire computer, my son is having panic attacks. He's not going to have his laptop back. We're all clinching. The super focus component, he put it back together and the glitch was fixed. But I think about, am I in danger of burning out? The family's like, oh my gosh, how do we stop him? How do we stop? No, Dad,
right.
no, Dad. But the hyper focus, it ended up being a great thing. So anyway, that's my little comical sidetrack there. But no, I don't believe that we're in danger of burning out. But, when we think about medication management, and this is from my psychiatric nurse background, what we observe. So with children who are on stimulants, most of them, the protocol typically today is that they stay on it consistently through the school year. And some people choose to come off it during the summers. Some people find that no way, they can't come off it because the kids are just bouncing off the walls and
right.
And being destructive to themselves and others. But with children, we see that it's prescribed continually. But with adults, as I referred to earlier, adults are encouraged to take breaks, and different docs have different protocols. So with Wellbutrin, which is a dopamine-based antidepressant, we don't want folks coming on and off that.
No, I take that religiously.
Right, yeah, so we want that to be steady because it increases the dopamine availability in your brain. However, with the stimulants, many docs encourage medication breaks. Some will say stay off it on the weekends. Some will say only use it as needed. So if you have a project at work or a meeting or a deadline or what have you. And in some folks that I work with, take a break every 2 to 3 days. So every third day they don't take it. And I think it's a matter of an individual figuring out what works for them, if it does work with them. But what we find with adults, and so while there's not a danger of burning out by taking the medication, with adults we do see a risk of tolerance. And most adults will share with me that the longer they take a stimulant without a break, they feel it can become less effective.
Yes.
And so, is my brain going to burn out? No. But can I develop tolerance? Yes. Can I have extreme focus to the point that my family gets a little annoyed with me? Yes. But all of these things, I think that they're fantastic questions because people get afraid. They're like, well, I don't want to take it because is it going to fry my brain? I get that question a lot. One of my clients said, I read an article that says Adderall puts holes in your brain. And I said, well, I've not read that one. Bring it to me and let me take a look.
I think about that too. Like, oh my gosh, I'm getting so much done, but am I going to, at some point my body's just going to say, put me in a hospital because you've just been going at it for blah, blah, blah. And which, you just answered that question, but I take breaks on the weekends. Unless I have a big project I have to do, I don't take it on the weekends. And that seems to work for me.
And is that Wellbutrin or is that a stimulant?
I take Vyvanse.
Vyvanse, yeah. And that's what I observe. And, we're real careful. And of course, a psychiatrist is who's going to direct this. But what I observe as a clinician and as a psychiatric nurse is, we're real careful to not think of it as, I'm just going to take this medication like a Tylenol, but it helps facilitate me executing the things that I want to execute, and then balancing that with not wanting to develop tolerance, because we know that it's only effective when in the system. Yeah.
And I also, just listeners, so you know too, I will, if I know that I'm going to go, like as an example, Wednesdays, I go to therapy with my therapist, and so I don't take it first thing in the morning on Wednesdays because I don't really need it. I'm going to therapy. We're going to be talking. I don't need, really what I take it for is to help me with staying on task with work things and with personal function things. I don't need it to sit in my therapist office. So on those days, I will take it later in the day when I'm getting ready to start working again. So I feel like you can also kind of regulate, the time that you need to take it, because it takes about a half an hour before it starts to kick in.
Well, and the other thing that goes along with that is that once we have become diagnosed with ADHD and we're on a medication regimen, and we begin to integrate, the therapeutic strategies for organization or time management, or, all of the other reasoning and remembering and things that we spoke about earlier, our level of self-esteem goes up. Mm-hmm. Our level of anxiety and depression goes down. Right. And so when there's stability in our mood because of successful treatment of ADHD, then we can utilize the stimulant medication in the areas where we need that focus and productivity. And so it's a really neat process. And it's not a short process. I mean, finding the right therapist and putting together the right treatment plan and getting support for that treatment plan and maintaining it is not a simple process, but the outcome, and the benefit that people experience on the other end really does reinforce the continued work in that area.
Okay. So do we have time for one last question?
Oh, we sure do.
Okay. All right. So the last one was, it felt like I was more agitated at the end of the day when my medication started to wear off, but over time this has lessened. When you talk about how that can happen because we aren't used to being focused, so when meds wear off, our racing thoughts start again, which can be irritating. Hearing that helped me a lot. I'm 64, and one of my doctors said, I'd lived with this my whole life without medication, so what is the point of taking it now? I wonder what to say about something like that. It seems really rude or ageist. So there's two questions in there. One is, yes, I believe I've heard it. I heard it from my psychiatrist that, Kristen, it's not that you're agitated at the end of the day, and I don't get agitated anymore, but in the beginning I did. She said, it's not because it's making you agitated. It's because squirrel brain comes back and you're like, oh, I don't like this. And the more you use it, you'll know that that's just the medication wearing off. And, the irritation is about having that racing mind back. It's nothing to do with the medication causing it. So that was wonderful.
The analogy I like to use to that, though, is it's like wearing scratchy glasses. Follow me? So if you're a person like myself who wears glasses, if you've got, scratches and smear marks all over it and you're trying to have a conversation with a colleague, it's irritating. You think, good heavens, I can't see you. I'm looking up and down sideways trying to get past these smudges,
Right.
It's annoying. Whereas when you can clean them, you see clearly. And that's what I observe. And same thing you're saying, the chatter comes back, the distractions come back, we're more easily overwhelmed. So less medication related and certainly symptom related.
Right, exactly. Okay, so let's talk about the age thing, because we got a lot of emails about this with a lot of people saying, even my ex-husband, who, oh my gosh, he is the poster child for ADHD and has been told that forever. Why no one prescribed him anything, I do not know. But now he's jumping through 8 million hoops to try and get on something. And they're even saying that to him. Well, you're 60 years old. Like, what's the purpose of you having it now? And then when I got emails about it, I was like, okay, we need to talk about this, because that just ticks me off.
Well, it ticks me off, but it makes me want to blurt out loud again. I'll pull it in. I want to say it's a reflection of the prescribing doctor's character. How about that?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, but I have this theme, and I have it. I think it relates here 100%. But I use it in all walks. I use it with all forms of therapy, and it's this. I say, we are never too old and it is never too late. And if we're diagnosed at 16 or 65, and it can increase the quality of life, the quality of relationships, which are going to affect our attachment and our connection with other people, for heaven's sakes, yes.
Yeah.
Let's get the relief we need. It's like saying, well, your car, has 140,000 miles on it, and my 4Runner is going to probably go, 250,000 miles. But we don't need new tires. You might as well keep it. You only have 150,000 miles left. Why don't you keep those tires?
Why don't you keep those bald tires on your car, especially
sliding off the snowbank
season?
Yes, there I am in a snowbank, but
it's an old car anyway. Yeah. Oh, exactly. I was so angry when I heard that.
And again, this comes back to where I mentioned earlier that there are really very few clinicians that I would say are experts in adult ADHD. More and more, we're seeing it in treatment facilities for dual diagnoses, as an underlying diagnosis with substance use abuse and dependence. But in the day-to-day, clinicians, they don't think, ADHD. I do peer supervision with other professionals, and we're talking about diagnostic clarification and what have you. And I'm telling you, ADHD in adults is not one that's on top of the board. I'm always the one going, hey, do you think there's an ADHD process going on here? And they're like, oh yeah, wait a second. My wife doesn't grocery shop. She doesn't clean. She gets overwhelmed by school activities.
Yeah.
She isolates. She gets focused on projects that take her away for hours at a time.
And don't get finished a lot of the time.
And she's on Zoloft and she's not getting better. And I said, bingo, I think we have a misdiagnosis here, and so yes, I say, we're never too old and it's never too late. If we can increase our quality of life at 64, 84, and 94, I'm all for it. All for it.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Lisa Day. Oh my gosh. Everyone, this is Dr. Lisa Day. She is part of the Meyer Clinics team. It's please visit their website, www.meierclinics.com. They do so many amazing things. They have these incredible day programs that are called Catalyst, their Catalyst program. It's in multiple locations of theirs. They're all over the United States. And, if you listen to my show, Mental Health News Radio, we have Dr. Paul Meyer, who is one of the founders of those clinics, on every week. And I'm telling you, if I knew these people eons ago, my life would have been in a much happier place. So I can't express enough how important it is to work with people like you, Lisa, and like Paul, and like anyone at the clinics that actually know and care and communicate and learn what the best strategies are. I mean, and I say this not to do some kind of big advertisement. I say this because I've interviewed the best and the brightest in mental health. Okay. And I'm not a clinician, I'm a patient, but I have interviewed over 1,000 people, and it's such a gift to know people that care like this, that study like this, that know what they're talking about and look for. It's kind of like you guys are all like House, that show House, except you're really nice. We don't
have a cane. We're not going to hit you in the head.
Exactly. You all care, and you're like, let's figure this out, and let's try this, and let's do that. And that is, I'm a rarity out there. It really is. So I just encourage anyone to go look at those sites and get the right kind of help.
And I'll tell you one thing, Kristen, and I so appreciate that feedback. I really, really do. And I think it's a reflection of, anybody who comes into my office, I will say to them right off the bat, I won't teach you anything that I don't personally practice on a regular basis. I know this stuff hard, fast, and true to work. And so I invite you, on that journey. I invite you on that journey of healing. So
exactly. And you're also very human. You all share, like Paul a million times he's told everybody how much, what his prescriptions are for himself. I mean, he's so open, I'm a human.
We're all on this journey. We're all on this journey together, right?
Exactly.
Yes, absolutely.
We hope you enjoyed enjoyed this podcast. Tune in next time for another engaging discussion on relevant mental health topics. If you have any questions about Meyer Clinics, please visit our website at meyerclinics.com. That's MEIER clinics.com, or call us at 888-7-CLINIC. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or any of your favorite podcast apps. And please note that we are a member of and produced by Mental Health News Radio Network, MHNRnetwork.com.